In the year 2021, renewable energy, like from wind turbines, makes up about 10% of the electricity generated in Illinois. The state also leads the nation in nuclear power, but by the year 2050, environmentalists and some lawmakers want 100% of our power coming from clean and renewable sources.
We don't have 50, 60, 70 years to worry about climate change. We need to worry about it today.
What effect will moving exclusively toward nuclear, solar, and wind have in a state that's had economic struggles and population loss? From Illinois Public Media, this is the 21st at the Capitol. Hello, I'm Brian Mackey, host of The 21st, a midday talk show that can be heard Monday through Thursday on NPR stations across Illinois. I'm also a longtime former State House reporter, and from time to time, we're going to be taking our program from the radio to television to talk with Illinois lawmakers and advocates about what they're doing in the Capitol and in virtual settings, and how it might affect your life. The effects of climate change are evident in Illinois, from more frequent storms and flooding to hotter summers putting a strain on farmland. This year in Springfield, lawmakers are advancing at least 6 different proposals aimed at making the state's energy industry more green. The Clean Energy Jobs Act aims to make Illinois 100% reliant on clean and renewable energy by the year 2050. The Path to 100 is a similar plan, and supporters say it could create more than 53,000 jobs. And the Climate Union Jobs Act would make sure nuclear power remains a big part of our energy infrastructure. Illinois leads the nation in nuclear power, producing more than any other state. There are currently 6 such plants, but owner Exelon says without state help, they'll take some offline. Meanwhile, coal mining has a long history in Illinois, and though most of the coal mined here is shipped to other states and overseas, burning coal accounts for about a quarter of Illinois' energy production. Experts say climate change will bring more and more extreme heat days to Illinois. They say the power to shape that future lies in rethinking how those in the future get their power. Joining us now to talk more about energy and how it relates to climate and justice is Jen Walling, Executive Director of the Illinois Environmental Council. In order to keep safe during the pandemic, she joins me now remotely from her office in downtown Springfield. Jen, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start with the basics. Why does Illinois need to move toward cleaner energy production, and how quickly does it need to get there?
All of this, with our need for clean energy, is centered around the climate crisis. We know that the climate crisis is not only hitting the United States, but it's uniquely hitting Illinois in a number of different ways, whether it's the increased costs to our infrastructure, whether it's increased flooding that impacts farm fields, whether it's the increase in the number of endangered species. We are having real economic, human, and public health impacts caused in Illinois by the climate crisis. Not to mention that some of these dirty energy facilities have been causing other pollution effects, whether it's metals or other toxic chemicals that have been impacting communities throughout Illinois during their entire life cycle. We need to transition to clean energy. We need to do it as quickly as possible, and we need to do it in a way that maximizes economic development and infrastructure.
And I mean, are we talking about solar panels on everyone's houses, a windmill in every backyard, and electric cars in every garage and parking space? Or is this more of a something that has to be done collectively with more, the big power production facilities that will become not coal burning, but instead, getting their energy from the sun or the wind?
Absolutely. I think the way that this will impact an everyday Illinoisan will go from the technology that you are using, whether it be smart technology to use less energy at different times, to things like utility scale solar or wind programs in different places of the state, or individuals who have solar panels on their homes, electric vehicles in their cars, increased energy efficiency all the way through residential and commercial buildings. I think the impact in an Illinoisan's life will be from individual actions all the way to big commercial scale. So there are a lot of solutions that need to be involved here, and it'll be things that people see and impact them in positive ways.
The Illinois Environmental Council's proposal, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, it has equity as a key component. Can you talk more about what that means and what that focus would look like?
Sure. So we're part of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which is pushing the Clean Energy Jobs Act. And even more important than renewable energy or decarbonization or electrification of the transportation sector is our equity, jobs, and workforce provisions. We know that in Illinois, pollution facilities, especially those pollution facilities that are very large, are sited in Black and Brown communities, low income, middle class, Black and Brown communities. If you look at maps, that's where these facilities end up for the vast majority. And despite that, those folks are still in a minority of the population. That's where we're putting our big, heavy polluting facilities. And so we need to make sure that we are centering these programs on racial equity, on economic equity. So we're looking at programs that make sure that we can diversify the workforce. Trades labor has needed to diversify its workforce. I know they're taking steps to do it, but making sure that people who are in unions and labor really have a diverse set of people involved, to contractors and people who own businesses. So our bill not only goes from the workers, but it looks at contractors, it looks at entrepreneurship. I mean, we have just disinvested in Black and Brown communities through not providing the investment, through not providing the capital, to making sure that folks, just because of their color of their skin, didn't have access to loans. And so making sure that we really supplement some of those inequities is really important. But also, there are people in the state who have had more of a pollution burden, not only in those environmental justice communities, but anywhere that there might be a coal plant or natural gas plant. You're seeing communities that have been impacted in a disproportionate way by the pollution that has impacted their lungs and their public health. So making sure that we are looking at transition in those communities as the coal plants close.
I want to ask about some of the objections to the proposal, though, the Clean Energy Jobs Act. Ameren, Illinois, which is the main utility, electric and gas utility for a lot of central and southern Illinois, argues that moving away from they have a two-pronged critique. I guess moving away from the capacity-based system we have could leave customers languishing in the heat or freezing in the cold, like happened in Texas. They also argue that the Clean Energy Jobs Act benefits Chicago customers at the expense of those downstate, in part by focusing on sort of individual smaller scale solar projects, rooftop and community solar, as they're known, as opposed to larger scale projects. How do you respond to those critiques?
Well, we are asked often how we're paying for the renewable energy, right? And our system really looks at capacity market reform, and that's what's different than the other bills that are out there. Capacity market reform in Illinois is incredibly important from the perspective of fossil fuel subsidies. When we look at Illinois, we're spending nearly $1.7 billion on capacity, which is more than any other state. And capacity is just having a power source exist. And so, you compare us to Texas, and you brought up Texas, and Texas has an energy on demand market. They pay nothing for capacity, and they also have no regulation. That is not where we want to go. But in Illinois consumers are paying 20 to 30% of their electricity bill on capacity, just having the plant exist, which means $1.7 billion for fossil fuel subsidies. The coal plant that is in Waukegan, in an environmental justice community that residents do not want there because of its pollution impacts, is not marketable. It only exists because we are paying capacity payments for it to be online. So we should be taking some of that $1.7 billion and using it towards sources of energy that are not emitting carbon, that are cleaner sources, that are located within the state. So that is a proposal that we have for how we pay for much of our renewable energy system, taking those subsidies for fossil fuels and moving them around. And it is an essential part of the bill, is this capacity market reform to remove these coal subsidies. So incredibly important. I also don't think, in terms of disadvantaging downstate, I don't think that's accurate. I think that in terms of the way that we put the bill together, there are folks from all over the state who are going to want distributed generation. When you look at things like community solar and the first round of community solar, only 15% of the projects were picked, and none of them were in Cook County. The vast majority of them were suburban or downstate areas. And I think you'll continue to see that in terms of the market effectiveness of utility scale solar.
We're going to have to leave it there. Jen Walling is Executive Director of the Illinois Environmental Council. Jen, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
Coming up, we're going to hear from a state senator who's sponsoring another piece of legislation on energy with nuclear at its core. Stay with us.
News moves fast, and so does your schedule. Keep up with the 217 Today podcast weekday mornings. It's 10 minutes packed with the latest news and weather from the WILL team. Plus, one deeper dive into agriculture, education, health, and topics across Illinois. Download the 217 Today podcast from Illinois Public Media, your source for quality, trusted journalism.
Welcome back to the 21st at the Capitol. I'm Brian Mackey. We've taken our weekday radio show to television to talk about lawmaking and how it affects the people of Illinois. Joining us now for another perspective on the energy debate is State Senator Mike Hasting. He's a Democrat from Frankfort in the south suburbs of Chicago and a lead sponsor of the Climate Union Jobs Act. Senator Hasting, thanks for joining us.
Brian, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be serving the people of Illinois and also serving as the chairman of the Energy Committee for the state.
So, Senator Hasting, one of the main focuses, or what would you say, foci of your legislation is maintaining the state's nuclear capacity and the union jobs that service those nuclear power stations. Can you talk about, just in a general way, can Illinois reach its clean energy goals without nuclear, in your view?
First of all, Brian, my primary responsibility is to ensure the lights turn on for every Illinois resident across the state of Illinois. When that doesn't happen, we have big problems. And a lot of it comes down to reliability and ensuring that the grid is a highly performing grid and that we don't fall prey or succumb to some of the issues that we've seen across the country, whether that's the rolling blackouts in LA and California, or as a result of violent weather in Texas. I think we've seen what can happen when the energy doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But I sponsored the Climate Jobs Illinois bill, which focuses on investing not only in our nuclear fleet, but our clean energy future in Illinois.
We just heard from a member of the Clean Jobs Coalition, not to be confused with Climate Jobs Illinois, which is backing your proposal. Can you talk about how your legislation is different and, in your view, I presume, better than the clean energy jobs legislation?
Well, I don't necessarily think my bill is better than any other piece of legislation. What I will say is that the points in the legislation that are in there are part of a foundation that I think we can build upon. All of the bills that are submitted, and there's 6 substantial bills that deal with investing in Illinois' clean energy future. I do believe that there's merits in each one of those that can be compiled into what I consider an omnibus bill. But I will tell you that there are some key points that I will advocate for, and they're for good reason. Number one is preserving our nuclear fleet and additional renewable generation is essential. Because when 2 nuclear plants close, and potentially 4 could close based on some of the announcements from Exelon, the economic impact that creates for the state in a negative stance is not what we need when we're coming off a COVID pandemic. Number one, people need to get put back to work. These jobs employ thousands and thousands of hardworking, trained, skilled union members and non-union members at the same time. And so it's important that we preserve those jobs. The economic impact that these plants have, if you look at Byron alone, that plant powers 2-point-some million homes. The economic impact from tax revenues, sales tax from people coming and going, working at the plant, is in the millions and millions of dollars. And when you look at the aggregate total of these plants, the economic impact is in the billions of dollars. That is what we do not need in the state of Illinois. We need to make sure that we preserve our nuclear fleet and that we also invest in additional renewable generation so it can create those jobs. That's one major provision of it. And for our folks that have coal plants across the state of Illinois, Coal plants are shutting down for economic reasons, not because the state is pushing a regulation on them to say you have to close. However, there are some proposals out there that do suggest that. But I will say that part of my plan is to create what they call a just transition. How do we invest in clean energy while utilizing the plant itself that's being shut down? I want to make sure that the workers of those plants are retrained. I want to make sure the property tax base at those plants is preserved and it's transitioned so that when you shut down a plant, it just doesn't close the town. Because again, we're coming off a pandemic and we want to make sure that these towns, some of them are small towns, we want to make sure that they're able to maintain a normal course of business and that they're able to incentivize other businesses to come to their towns.
How do you respond to people who say that this is, it's one thing to say you want to preserve the jobs and preserve the clean energy generated by the plants, but it's another thing to line Exelon shareholders' pockets. And that's not what Illinois needs to be doing, especially after the same company was before the legislature just a few short years ago, seeking assistance at that time and getting it at that time.
I'm going to tell you that that is not the intent whatsoever. And anyone who says that this is a General Assembly way of lining some corporate baron's pockets is a bunch of garbage. And I'm going to be very strong when I say that because when I presented the Clean Union or the Climate Union Jobs Act before my committee, the Illinois State Senate Energy Committee, I said a few different things. Number one is that these hard workers at these nuclear plants and other plants across the state of Illinois, they have a passion for what they do. It's in their blood, and at times that it's passed down from generation to generation. They come from every walk of life. They love their profession. They love the communities and what they work for. But I made this very, very explicit. Their passion, their hard work and profession will not and should not be overshadowed by a dark cloud cast over by a greedy few. So when we pass this legislation, it will be balanced and it's not going to line anyone's pockets for that matter. And we're going to hold people accountable for their bad actions. That's my goal as the chairman of the Senate Energy Committee, and that's what the people of Illinois deserve.
We have been talking with State Senator Mike Hastings. He's a Democrat from Frankfort. Senator Hastings, thank you for your time.
Brian, God bless you and your family, and I hope everyone watching is happy and most importantly healthy.
All right, thank you, Senator.
Coming up, we're going to hear from the Path to 100, as in 100% renewable energy. Stay with us. Monday through Thursday, the 21st state is talking.
Our small rural hospitals, we have limited beds, but it's also limited staff.
In my years of running, I've been called the N-word, been heckled.
Our most recent project focused on women livestock farmers.
Join the conversation about Illinois. Listen to the 21st, Monday through Thursday at 11 a.m. on WILL AM 580, 6 p.m. on FM 90.9, or anytime at 21stshow.org.
Welcome back to the 21st at the Capitol. I'm Brian Mackey. As you know, we're taking our daily radio program and bringing it to television to cover some of the issues that Illinois lawmakers and advocates are working on and how it affects you. And joining us now for another perspective on the energy debate is Jonathan Feipel. He is a spokesman for the Path to 100, another of the clean energy proposals under consideration in Springfield. He's also a former executive director of state government's utility regulator, the Illinois Commerce Commission, and he joins us now from his residence in Springfield. Jonathan, thanks for making time for us.
Thanks much, Brian, for having me. It's great.
So Governor J.B. Pritzker, as you know and as we've talked about on this program, has committed Illinois to having 100% renewable energy by the year 2050. We're supposed to be a quarter of the way there by the year 2025. How are we doing on that?
And it's a great question, and it's one that dates back to the origin story of the Illinois RPS back to 2007. given a whole slew of different problems and hitches with the law and implementation, we never really got to developing our renewable base here in the state, right? We used to pull renewable credits from around us from other states. And that's what the Future Energy Jobs Act that kicked in about 5 years ago really did a great overall policy shift to make sure that we were focusing on building new projects here in the state. What we're able to do in that 5 year period there, and think about it as one series of programs, right? Because it took our Illinois Power Agency some time to get all the new mandates in place. We jumped from about 3% in state renewables to about over 8% in that one series of programs. The trouble is, if you think about it on the back end, what we did was we crammed 10 years of pent up demand for renewables into that one series of programs. So now we're out of money. So at this point in time, given the budget constraints, Illinois is going to flatline out there at about 8% renewables for 5 years or so. And then we'll have this kind of boom bust, lumpy development cycle going forward. We'll never really get to those bigger, lofty goals. And that's what the Path 100 Act is really designed to do by the renewable industry to get us back on track to be able to meet those kind of targets.
And some people have referred to this as the solar cliff briefly. Can you talk about what that means in terms of jobs and the development of the renewable industry sector in Illinois?
That term has really caught on. What we were talking about was, if you think about the kind of the canary in the coal mine for the renewable industry, right, is the women and men who work in the solar industry in particular. The smaller the company, the more susceptible they are to layoffs and bankruptcy and the like. And we'd been projecting out 2 years ago when we introduced the legislation that there at the end of 2020 was when the last dollar was going to be available for new development. And that got tagged as the quote solar cliff, because at that point in time, you're going to move past the point where a budget could function. And that's when there's real hardship. If you think about, we built up about 5,500 jobs in the solar industry up to the end of 2019. And we lost about 3,500 in the last year, given the budget crisis, exacerbated by COVID, certainly, but the budget is the real driver there as the cliff has kicked in now.
And I'm afraid our time is short. So briefly, what is the vision of the future of the Path to 100, as the group is called, in terms of, because there has been criticism that some of the past developments and that it focused too much on what's called rooftop or community solar, as opposed to, bigger, more centralized energy projects. Where does your group see the future of clean energy development with regard to solar and wind in Illinois going forward?
It's a great question, because it's really important to note that what we need to have in the state is a balanced mix of all of the different project types. Yes, you need big utility scale wind and solar projects. We absolutely support those in our bill. But you also have to have community solar and rooftop solar to provide those direct customer benefits, right? You put solar panels on your rooftop, you save money on your bill every month. If you don't have access to your own rooftop, you can subscribe to a community solar project, again, for direct bill savings. And what we find, and we're going to be releasing some reports here in the near future that show that actually, if you maintain that mix of direct overall bill savings through community solar, rooftop solar, all of the big utility scale projects for overall price reductions to energy market prices, all of these renewables in essence pay for themselves when you combine up all of those benefits. And there's actually net savings to all customers in Illinois.
My final question to you is more of a sort of a big picture philosophy question. I got to imagine some people are listening to this and saying, why not just let the market handle power? And why is it important in your view, in your group's view, to have the government, put its thumb on the scale of how Illinois sources its energy?
And actually, what we're trying to do is have the market, in essence, drive a lot of this discussion around renewable energy. The key is, though, is that for 100 years, we've never really had any way to value the clean energy benefits of renewable energy. For example, when a coal plant emits all of the different pollution types, the healthcare benefit, the healthcare problems that result, the dirtiness that has to get cleaned up in other ways, polluted water and all that. Renewables don't have any of those problems. We need to find a way to value that piece. And that's what the overall government policy is set to do.
We've been talking with Jonathan Feipel. He's a spokesperson for the Path to 100. which is one of the multiple energy groups making their voices heard in the General Assembly this spring. Jonathan, thanks for being with us today on the 21st.
Thanks. This was great.
Tell us what you think about what you just heard about the future of energy in Illinois. Send an email to talk@21stshow.org. We might read your message on our radio program, which airs Monday through Thursday at 11 a.m. on WILL, AM 580, and NPR stations across Illinois. For all of us at Illinois Public Media, I'm Brian Mackey. Thanks for joining us.